Okay. So for the first section of this section that we're going over, we're starting with social psychology, and then we'll end this section with personality psychology as then we move on to what's called abnormal psychology, where we'll talk about different types of mental illnesses. But for now, what we want to get through is how is social psychology defined, and what it is we can glean about our social life and social situations that motivate our behavior. Okay, so I want to start with just providing a definition of what social psychology is, and that's a little bit different than the general psychology definition, which, if you remember, is a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Okay, for social psychology, we take on that same definition, but it's more of a scientific attempt to explain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of individuals that are influenced by actual, imagined, or implied presence of other human beings. Now, why do we say actual, imagined, or implied presence of others? Because sometimes we behave as if we're being watched, or other people are viewing what we're doing. Probably a really good example of this is if you've ever driven in a very remote area in the middle of the night and there happens to be a stoplight. Most of the time, we stop at that stoplight, and even though no one is around, we wait for it to turn green. Okay, and the idea is that the reason we do that is there's always this notion that somebody might see, somebody might recognize, or maybe there's a camera that's going to catch us going through that light. And so that's my best example of imagined or implied presence of others, is sometimes we behave as if others are there. Okay, and so with this, there's kind of three growing themes within the field that social psychology has shown. Okay, one is group influence and power of groups. That really groups do matter to us, as we will see through the different studies we will view. And that subjective experience, the person matters. Okay, this has to do a lot with things like attitude, social perceptions, those kinds of things. But really, individual experience matters within the group context. And then the third one is that small manipulations can have large influences on behavior. Okay, meaning that you don't have to change much in the social situation to get behavior change. It doesn't have to be a huge, persuasion type of thing to get people to behave in a certain way. Just small little manipulations can have huge influences on behavior. And kind of one of the theoretical orientation of social psychology is something called situationalism. And that is the scientific belief in the significance of the context or the situation that the person lives in or exists in. Okay. And we're going to watch a video here in just a second, but probably the best example of situationalism, or one of them at least, is organ meat studies that were done during World War II. And of course, with the war going on, there was a meat shortage, and so the U.S. government wanted individuals, or encouraged individuals, to start eating some of the organ meats, like the heart and the liver and those types of things, as a supplement for protein. And their messaging was they used all of what we know about persuasion in advertisement and everything, and it had very, very little effect. Okay. But what Kurt Lewin found is if you seed individuals within communities, so and encourage them to encourage their friends to to start utilizing organ meats and stuff like that. That just that influence, that social influence, was enough to significantly increase the consumption of organ meat within communities. So, but there's also another really good example of situationalism that deal with what's known as the Stanford Prison Studies and things that happened in Iraq during the Iraq War. I'm going to play a video just to kind of provide that example of situationalism and its influence on individual behaviors and individual choices. Okay, so let me mute. I'm going to resume recording and share my screen again. Okay. So as mentioned in the video, and why is it the social psychologists emphasize the situation is ordinarily people overemphasize issues like personality, as Zimbardo put it. We tend to emphasize dispositional characters of individuals when we're making judgments about their behavior and behaviors of others. Ordinary people also we often underemphasize the situation and its influence on our behavior. Okay. Maybe a good example of this is, can loneliness influence things like personality? So feeling like you don't have sufficient people in your life to support you. A lot of times people will say, no, emotional states can influence a person's personality. But we actually find that loneliness influences whether someone becomes materialistic or non-materialistic. Meaning that the value of items and the value of possessions becomes more important as a person becomes more and more lonely. Okay. We also know that, again, going back to studies of loneliness, does perceived personality predict outcomes? Loneliness, which predicts attributes of things we like. So we're more likely to provide human qualities to gadgets and pets and those kinds of things, the more and more lonely we are. So it even influences our perceptions, our social world, and how we feel we're connected with it. So these are just some of the ways in which, again, what we're talking about in this section is how do individuals make decisions. And we need to keep in mind that we are very much a social being, and that influences, therefore, our behavior, whether we recognize it or not. Okay. We already went over that with the video, so we won't go over that again. So one of the questions that we have to come up with or ask, especially for your final assignment for this section, is what is social influence? How do we use influence of others to make judgment calls, make decisions, and those kinds of things? Okay. And so just as a definition of social influence, it's the myriad of ways that people impact one another, including changes in attitudes, beliefs, feelings, and behaviors that results from comments, actions, or even just the mere presence of others. Okay. And remember, in the definition, this can be real or imagined presence of others. If we think someone is there but may not actually be there, that still influences the way we behave. So we'll come back to that one. Okay. Trying to decide, gang. You know what? This next topic is going to take a little bit more time than what we have left. So I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any questions?